Hey everybody, this is the Marriage Ranger, Michael Hildreth of Abilene, Texas. I want to welcome you back to my channel today. Please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming content. Today we're going to be talking about why nonviolent communication is needed to create peaceful constructs of compassionate giving, and why life-alienating language is inherently violent. Stick around to learn more. When studying how to use nonviolent communication, we consider several forms of language that are called life-alienating speech. And it's life-alienating in part because it coerces and manipulates individuals to do what is expected of them, and it punishes those who resist. When violent words are spoken, people do as they are told because they have to, not because they want to. Their words and actions, according to this philosophy of human conduct, have nothing to do with freedom or choice. It's an obscured speech that destroys awareness of personal responsibility and decision-making. We are all guilty of coercive language to some degree, even though we don't realize it. We say things like, "I think you should do what I asked you," or "You never listen to what I say," or "I feel like you aren't paying attention to me," or "I feel that you aren't doing what is expected of you." While these expressions may seem benign, they actually cause great damage to our relationships. They create within our listeners a spirit of resentfulness because they think they only have two options: submission or rebellion. Instead of speaking with compassionate and peaceful speech to increase productive dialogue, we regularly try to force others to give us what we want. We try to change them or get them to behave in a right way or the way that we consider to be right. When their reaction is less than desirable, we tend to respond with accusing and attacking and demeaning them. We do this because we think that somehow they deserve blame for their noncompliance. And this puts us in an even worse position, doesn't it? When we look at this problem sociologically, it becomes painfully obvious just how out of touch our society has become with our God-given and natural state of compassion. Moralistic judgments of other human beings abound on TV programs, news articles, in movies, and on each politician's social media account. As they seek to prove how right they are and analyze how wrong their opponents are, people become more and more polarized. If our nation's leaders, athletes, and entertainers set the standard for speech and behavior, it certainly doesn't bode well for humanity as a whole. The most provocative voices blare loudly, while the peacefully dissenting voices are ridiculed or silenced. Recently, the attempted coercion by the powers that be to force a certain treatment on every human being has left many feeling resentful and many others fearful. Never has the blaming and shaming been so widespread than during the recent worldwide crisis. The dehumanization, demonization, and intolerance for those who decline the treatment eerily harkens back to some of the darker days of human history. It's been a coordinated and unified effort to deny freedom of choice and force many people to take this treatment against their wishes using threats. This will go down in history as one of humanity's lowest points. In my view, the blaming and classifying of these dissenters is the most alarming facet of the emergency. It is this type of language which has historically preceded great violence and even the mass extermination of human beings by the state. After taking power in the 1920s, Joseph Stalin murdered 50 million of his own people that he deemed were unfit for society because they were not submissive enough to the state. Adolf Hitler murdered at least 6 million Jews. Mao Zedong killed more than 80 million, and Pol Pot killed 2 million Cambodian people. What did they all have in common? Each of these leaders preceded their violent attacks and their violent actions with violent words. They each began with coercive language before reaching a final solution. It only makes sense then that violent language leads to violent acts in our world today. Coercion always has an end result. The opposite of this coercion, though, is freedom, choice, dignity, and life. So as we use these genocidal regimes as the most extreme example of the ill effects of life-alienating language, we notice the destructive power. Many have resisted the forced treatment simply out of disdain for the powers that be or out of concern for adverse reactions. However, it's much more than that. The strong resistance, in large part, can be attributed to the violent language being spewed forth by national, state, and local governments in nearly every country on earth. Their own language has proven to be their downfall as they force the whole world to undergo these treatments, even threatening to deprive basic human rights in the process, such as right to travel, right to assemble, or right to earn a living. The more coercive, the more forceful and intimidating they become, the more dug in are the resistors. If you were paying attention to current events over the past 2 years or so, you would have been watching a worldwide, real-time example of life-alienating language. Life-alienating language supports and stems from what Dr. Marshall Rosenberg calls domination societies, wherein large populations are controlled by a small number of ruling elites. The more people are trained to think in moralistic, blaming terminologies that imply wrongness or badness, the more they are inclined to look outside themselves for the definition of truth. They become terrified, shamed, and isolated by the powers that be. They turn to them alone for guidance. However, this dynamic eventually falls apart because there will always be freedom seekers who resist. It is placed within our nature by God to resist when we are forced into a corner by tyrannical language. And so there is a reason authoritarianism has ultimately failed in every experiment in world history. People in touch with their own compassionate nature always bring it down. Every totalitarian regime has fallen or is in the process of falling because it is not of God. For those of us who believe in choice and the right to decide our own destiny in this life, we know that language which obscures personal responsibility and freedom of choice will never achieve one's desired goals. In fact, using blaming and shaming language almost certainly makes one less likely to get what they want. Life-alienating language which motivates through fear and force is ineffective because those in tune with their own feelings and needs do not make good slaves of the state. Instead, they react to compassionate language, which implies freedom and personal responsibility. Furthermore, those guilty of judgmental words are eventually themselves judged by others, and finally by God. This is a universal principle which emanates from Scripture. Jesus said in the book of Luke, chapter 6, verse 37, "Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned." If our spouses, families, relatives, friends, and coworkers hear words from us which imply wrongness and blame, their rejection will be sharp. They will usually react by pointing the finger back at us and rebelling against us. On the other hand, to abstain from judgment and bestow the gift of choice is to achieve a new level of God consciousness. It's to achieve freedom and compassion not known by the despots of this world. In nonviolent communication, this is what we're trying to do. We are creating constructs of compassionate giving from the heart. We are granting freedom and choice to the people that we speak with from a place of love and peace. We are speaking the way that God created us to speak. If you have any questions, or if you want to find out more about nonviolent communication, or if you're interested in getting counseling for you or your family, you can contact me at www.marriageranger.com. God bless you.